takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens?
Well, good morning, everyone. I am Darcy Winslow with the Magnolia Moonshot 2030, which is a project of the Academy for Systems Change. And today we have Beach Pace. And I had the pleasure of meeting Beach probably 3 weeks ago. And Beach is extraordinary. Literally within the first 5 minutes, I was like, I want to support this woman however possible. And right now, Beach Pace is the CEO of Big Brothers and Big Sisters. You currently sit on the Hillsborough City Council as a city councilor. You and your wife were both graduates of West Point, which I'm sure there are a few stories there. And not to put an age on this, but there probably weren't a lot of women at West Point at that time. And yeah, so feel free to share any of that. But the reason why we're here today, in 21 days, our local elections are happening, and Beach is running for the Washington County chair, which is a really important position and holds a lot of influence and sway in local politics. And I think one of the things that I was most struck was the authentic, genuine, and deep commitment to ethical leadership and to be in service of others. And so, Beach, maybe, just share a little bit of your story of how you have come to be the leader that you are today.
Thanks, Darcy. Thanks for having me. And I appreciate you to all your listeners who are tuning in. The journey started obviously a while ago, but I was very into the military. It just fascinated me when I was a kid, and I would steal my brother's rain boots because they look like army boots, and I would wear those around. And I was just always interested in it. And even films about war or, just strategy and tactics, I found fascinating. So in high school, I was in junior ROTC, in Air Force junior ROTC, and I had some great instructors in that course, in addition to just high school, which was a good experience. And then I decided to go to West Point, or apply to West Point, the United States Military Academy. It's the oldest military academy in the US. And when you graduate, you have the opportunity to serve in the US Army. And so it was very attractive to me to go to that school, to try at least. And I had other offers at other schools for athletic scholarships. And anyway, but I was most interested in West Point, and luckily I was able to get in. And so after graduation, I had about 5 days off and went into West Point. So that began my leadership career.
Wow. How do you define leadership, and who in your lifetime did you really look up to?
So first of all, defining leadership, to me, it's inspiring a group of people toward a common goal. And that common goal is shared. Everybody in the group wants to achieve that goal, ideally. Mm-hmm. And people I looked up to, I would say that my parents were very influential. I probably would have denied that as a teenager, but they were both very into service. So my father was in Rotary at the time. And at that time, women weren't allowed to be in Rotary. Right. And my mom was in Eastern Star. And so both were service organizations. And so we were always out at events for fundraisers or whatever it might be for those organizations, or for families who may have lost their house in a fire or whatever. It was always service oriented. And I guess I caught the bug, to serve. And I also saw the joy that it brought people, and it just felt good to be in those spaces where community came together at, for example, a concert, or to benefit a family. It just felt great. And so I really liked that feeling, and I wanted to continue it.
That's great. That's great. I mean, we need more ethical leadership right now. And even those two words together, I think, is kind of rare and also a new phenomenon. Can you say a little bit more about ethical leadership?
This is something that's very important to me. Mostly, as you said, it's rare. But I remember in high school when I said to people that I wanted to go to West Point and I wanted to serve my country, they laughed. Idealism was a joke. And, this was in the 80s. And so this was, at the time of like that famous movie, Wall Street, the original version,
right.
Where it was about greed and achievement and money. And at the time I was in Jersey. And so we're right near New York. So we're right near Wall Street. Like it was about Lamborghinis and big houses and all that. And it didn't interest me. I found that those folks, when I was able to interact with them or whatever, they weren't very genuine. And so, to me, having good leadership and in service makes a difference, but also ethical leadership, because people should trust the folks that are making decisions about their daily lives. And again, ethics were seen as kind of a joke as well. And even today, people make jokes about politicians, which is, fine, it's all good. But in a way, it saddens me, because I know that because of the actions of others, there are people in politics who bear that burden when they've done nothing wrong. And I'm not alone in my ethical leadership. And, I serve with people right now on Hillsborough City Council who recuse themselves if there's a decision that's being made that could benefit them financially. And there's no issue. They're like, of course I would recuse myself, and to see unethical leadership at any level is disheartening, but especially at the higher levels. So anyway, it's important to me, and earning the public trust is also important to me. If somebody's going to vote for me, then I owe that to them. And also, it's just a personal code. I want to be able to look back and say I did the right thing and for the right reasons.
That's fabulous. One of the guiding principles of Magnolia Moonshot 2030 is to have the courage to tell the truth. And that seems so mundane, but again, it is so needed right now. Service leadership, ethical leadership. Say a little bit about your role as CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters. You shared some statistics with me the other day, and I didn't appreciate just how extraordinary the impact of that organization is.
Yeah, thank you. So Big Brothers Big Sisters has been around for over 100 years, and since 1904. And the site that I have the honor of leading, the site Big Brothers Big Sisters Columbia Northwest in Portland, Oregon, that's been around. We're in our 20th year now. And our vision is that all children achieve their greatest potential. And when we look at some of the kids that we have the honor of working with, especially in the local area, when they have what's called an adverse childhood event, and I could go into those if you're interested, but when kids are experiencing an adverse childhood event, that decreases their chances for high school graduation. And as we all know, that's a pretty big and basic step to launch yourself into the world. And so the kids that the demographic of children that we work with, they have an average graduation rate of 66%. But the graduation rate of the kids who go through our program is 95%. And that's yeah, thank you. That's an extraordinary achievement. And thanks to my staff and the mentors, the big brothers and big sisters and big siblings who all serve those kids. And they're all dedicated one-to-one mentors. They're all volunteer, which means they want to be there, not paid to be there. They want to be there. And many of our mentors have been mentees themselves, either with Big Brothers Big Sisters or another program. And so they see the value and want to pay it forward, which is just so wonderful. So we also have, when the kids go through our program, they have a higher incidence of being active in the community, engaged in the community. And they also have higher grades in addition to their higher chance of graduation. And then we also help them with plans after graduation, whether that's college or a trade school or the military or whatever it might be. We help them apply, fill out financial aid forms, et cetera, to make sure that they have the support they need. Because oftentimes they're in a single parent home with a parent who has not gone through that process. And so they're either unfamiliar with the process or it's in a language that they don't speak firsthand, or both. And so my staff members and mentors are able to guide the kids through that. And it just, we're taking the talent that the kids already have and really allowing them to explore it and take it to new levels and new heights, I'm really proud of that work.
That's great. That's great. Well, I want to flip to your campaign. And again, you shared some of what you are running on, and they all resonated with me. But I'd love for you to say a little bit about, your stance on environment, community. You've talked a bit about ethical and servant leadership. So say a little bit about the platforms that you're running on and what you hope to achieve,
Sure.
as your time as county chair.
Sure. Yeah. So my platform is collaboration, inclusion, and ethics. I noticed I really had a front row seat as a Hillsborough City Councilor out here in Washington County, Oregon. I had a front row seat to see some of the decisions being made at the county were not very collaborative or inclusive at all. And instead of complaining, I usually just ask, tell me what's up. And so I went to the current chair and some other commissioners as well and said, hey, could you explain your thought process around this? And not in a mean way, but more in a, teach me kind of way. Is there something I missed or something I don't know? And when we had those conversations, and specifically when I had that conversation with the current chair, I found the reasons lacking. And over time, as different decisions were made, I would continue to ask and continue to be open to learning. And I was just kind of like patted on the head and sat down at the kids' table at Thanksgiving. That's kind of how it felt. And as I started talking to other people, I realized that they were treated the same way too. I was, there was a decision made by the county where they decided to put up a homeless shelter, which is great, good idea. But they decided to put it in the middle of the Latino business district, which,
Seriously.
yeah, it's horrible, horrible decision. So great idea, but terrible location. And there was really no collaboration or inclusion with the Latino community in that decision. And I remember early on in my campaign having a conversation with some Latino community members. There was, I think, about 20 of them on a Zoom call. And they said, Beach, as chair, how would you have informed us of this decision? And I said, I wouldn't have informed you. And they all kind of sat back like, what? And I said, I would have involved you. And there was a lot of silence after that answer because I would have. And that's just one example of the things I've seen. So I would like to bring more collaboration and inclusion to the role. And county-wide, not just in Hillsborough, I've seen the same thing. And the collaboration is lacking to such a degree that 11 mayors are endorsing me. 11 mayors in Washington County have said, we're behind you, Beach. And I think that speaks volumes around that collaboration and inclusion piece. Yeah. So, and for those of you who are data oriented, it's 11 of 15 mayors. If you're wondering, 11 of what?
Right.
Yeah. So, and 2 mayors are abstaining from endorsement. So 3 are endorsing her. So now the ethics piece is a little bit different. So I had heard rumors that she didn't treat people very well and that she would yell and scream. And I always took those with a grain of salt, right? Everybody has a bad day or they interpret an interaction differently. But what I started hearing that more and more and from different people. And that concerned me. So as I learned more, I started asking more questions. And I noticed that people started coming out of the woodwork really to tell me their story. And oftentimes it was, can it be a phone call? I don't want to share my last name.
Oh, wow.
I got your number from a friend. Yeah, they didn't want to share how they were connected. And through conversation, I found that many of them actually worked at the county and were fearful of being known because they didn't want to have any repercussions from it. So that spoke volumes to me. And then I started asking around to other people and they said, oh yeah, I've definitely seen this behavior. I've either received it or witnessed it. And so that spoke volumes to me. The other piece is that when I was in the service, I was in a hostile work environment. I experienced that.
Yeah.
And I know how that feels to go to work every day dreading it. And I stayed because I was dedicated to the Army and to my unit, but it was very deleterious to the team. And the team outputs weren't that great at all because we were more focused on survival instead of thriving. And so I know what that kind of leadership does. And so since the time that we've spoken, or since I've spoken with those folks, and since Darcy, since you and I met, a report has been released where it was definitively found that the current chair of Washington County does in fact create a hostile work environment. And so I was right. And I laugh because I've been told this entire time, this entire campaign, that I was wrong.
Mm, mm.
And so it felt kind of good to have that a report come out, which I had nothing to do with. It was from an outside investigator, but it felt validating, I think, is what I'm trying to say. And so that's the third reason I'm running, is that people should be able to work in a work environment that's safe.
Absolutely.
And that team, when they're in a safe environment, are not worried about surviving, as I mentioned. They're worried about innovative solutions to problems affecting our county.
And being able to
And
bring
that
their
is
best, bring their best to work
exactly
every day.
exactly to bring their best work every day. And so I mentioned that I know how it feels like to be in a hostile work environment. I also know how it feels like to be in a supportive work environment. And that's the exact kind of work that I want to bring, and leadership that I want to bring to Washington County, because I think it will make a difference. And I think a lot more people can be served with collaborative, inclusive, and ethical leadership that supports not only people in the county, but all community members across Washington County.
You know, Beach, I just want to hold up the mirror. I've worked with a lot of people in many, many different sectors, countries, cultures, and, words have meaning. Words are important. But when I was physically with you, your presence and your authenticity and your commitment, that spoke volumes. The two combined, I mean, I would say Beach for president, today. So, right now we're virtual, but, I know that you mean that. I know that you mean everything you just said. I'm also very curious. You've talked a lot about climate, the environment, sustainability. What does that look like here locally?
Yeah, so there hasn't been a whole lot of climate action at the county, and I don't think there's a whole lot of interest in it either. So, something that has resonated with me is, I've heard about climate change for decades now. Even as a kid, I remember people talking about it. And I remember people would dispose of their garbage out of their car windows, right? I mean, I remember that time where that was normalized.
Me too.
And so, decades later, and it's very evident that the climate is changing, our earth is changing. And I feel like we need to take real action. And I know that some countries aren't into it and some are, and it depends, but I know that I can make a difference locally, and we all can make a difference in our home, right? Each of us can make a difference through recycling and making better decisions about what kind of materials we use. But what I'd like to see at the county is the county take a real leadership role in environmental action as well. So, and one of the things that fuels me is my 17-year-old daughter told me last year, she said, Mom, when I get older, I'm probably not going to have children because I would think it's unethical to bring them into a world that is burning. And that is not a decision I ever had to make. It's nothing I ever had to think about. And I know that she's not alone. And I know that there are folks older than her who've made the same decision and younger than her who are talking about it as well. And that just is incredibly sad. And I know that we can change. It is possible to change. Absolutely. And that was proven through COVID, right? When we had dolphins in the canals at Venice, when skies cleared because people weren't driving, it is actually possible. And so I'd love to bring changes to the county, such as electrifying the fleet, having full solar panels on top of the building. We have some right now. Some of the fleet is electrified. I'd like to have an ordinance or some kind of protection for mature trees, because when you take down a tree that's a very old tree, that ability of that tree to convert carbon dioxide is not the same as a sapling. That's right. So a tree is not one for one, right? So protection of mature trees. I'd also like to have neighborhood programs where neighbors or neighborhood organizations or even HOAs could pool solar resources, right? Where they all share, everybody puts up solar and they can all share the energy from that. Shared cars, and things like scooters, electric vehicles as well, incentivizing businesses to have porous concrete instead of black asphalt for parking lots. Even something as simple as a white roof can make a difference.
Absolutely.
In heating and cooling, right? And so, these are some of the changes and incentives that I'd love to bring. And I don't like to ban things. I've found that as a city councilor, I find banning doesn't work, and everybody hates it and rails against it. But if you start incentivizing folks and explaining what's going on and talking with businesses and organizations and neighborhoods to say, hey, what can we do together to make a difference in climate in Washington County? And the idea is then we could inspire other counties and the state and other areas to do the same thing and make the same decisions. And I also think it could be business friendly, where we could work with environmentally friendly businesses or businesses who are trying to learn how to be environmentally friendly, to say, let's work together and figure this out together so we can continue and actually reduce the impact that we've had on our planet and make it a better place to live and give our kids some future.
Absolutely. Beach Pace for Washington County Chair. You said something that really resonated with me, but my time at Nike when I was leading our sustainability efforts, looking at how do we switch from tax-based approaches, banning, taxing, bad, to financially positive, incentivized approaches. It creates that pull, it creates that demand, and people will move much quicker. How can people support you, Beach?
Great question, and thanks for asking it. So you can go to my website at electbeachpace.com and learn more about me. And right now, which is 21 days left in the election, your donation would be most helpful. As I am still working to get the word out, I have staff that I'm paying and people that are working for me to make sure that people know about me, my platform, and what I want to do at Washington County and the change that I want to bring. And so donations would be the most helpful. If you live in Washington County, Oregon, please vote for me. And if you know someone who lives in Washington County, please call them up and say, hey, I just heard about this crazy gal named Beach. She's running for Washington County Chair, and support her. So anyway, that would be most helpful. Donations and voting, and then also spreading the word would be very helpful.
So I hear you just got a pretty important endorsement.
Yes, I did. I'm really proud of this. So it goes to the ethics piece. So when I first started the race back in November of 2021, I was talking to some unions and they said, hey, sorry, we already endorsed your opponent. I was late to the game. So I was like, all right, I understand. Thanks for your time. And here's a little bit about me. If you're ever interested in talking more, let me know. And they said, okay. And as things have changed and the report had come out, as I mentioned earlier, they called me back and they said, we'd like to talk to you again. And there is something that the unions have. Most unions have it, or a version of it. It's called safe from hate. And the idea there is that people can show up to job sites and feel safe. There were some folks that were showing up to job sites, women, minorities, people of color, et cetera, who were showing up and being discriminated against, or comments were being made, or worse. And the unions realized that they were losing really good people who were ready and trained and ready to go, but didn't feel safe at work. And they were losing real talent, and they got upset. So they implemented this safe from hate. I think it was about 5 to 6 years ago where they started it, where they started training, letting people know, encouraging management and training management as well, and employees and union members to say, this is how we conduct ourselves at work. This is how we respect each other. And based on that, those conversations started based on the commitment to safe from hate and the issue with the report that had come out about the current chair. They wanted to talk to me again. And so through those conversations, they realized, okay, they know what I'm about. They know I'm committed to ethics and collaborative and inclusive leadership. And so I just had 2 major unions come in and support me, the IBEW 48 and the AFL-CIO. And I'm really proud of that. And I think there'll be some more to follow. There's other unions who have already supported, which is wonderful, but the courage that these unions have shown to say, okay, we're gonna make a change. The IBEW switched completely, and I think that's a really courageous thing to do, where you have to talk to the other candidate and tell them that you're not endorsing them, and then switch. That's a tough conversation to have. And I thanked the union rep. I said, thank you for your courage for having that conversation. And he said, yeah. So thanks to IBEW 48 for that support.
That's fabulous. That's courage.
Yeah.
Once again.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And I also had a teachers union come in and endorse. They stayed neutral, and then they heard about the report, and then they came over to support. And it's Washington County Teachers for Hillsborough and Forest Grove. And when you think about schools and bullying, it only made sense, right? It only made sense to endorse me. So anyway, I'm really proud of those endorsements as well as others. And thanks for asking about it. I've had some real wins in the past few weeks as this information has come out, and I've even had some apologies where people are like, Beach, I didn't believe you, or I didn't know the extent of the situation. Thank you for running. So that makes me feel great.
That's fabulous. Yeah. Well,
yeah,
any last words? Any last words for people in general around leadership, around how to just be, Peter Senge, a teacher, a mentor of mine, said, to be a leader, you must first be human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you have to know yourself. So I just went right into it. Know yourself and seek self-improvement. And that's one of the principles of Army leadership. And so the first thing I would say is, if you're at all interested in leadership or wanting to get into it or learn more, you could Google the U.S. Army 11 Principles of Leadership. I learned those as a cadet at West Point, and they hold true to today. And one of them, as I mentioned, is seek responsibility and take responsibility for your actions. And so that's what I'm doing. And I would encourage other people to research leadership. Peter Senge is the man when it comes to leadership. So that's another resource. But I would also encourage people to switch gears a little bit. I'm talking about leadership, but I would also encourage you to engage. Local politics is where it's at. Local government is where it's at. And the decisions made locally have a much greater impact in most cases than decisions made at the state or national level. And so I would encourage you to be engaged. Ask your city councilors or commissioners or county or whomever you work with. Ask them about why they're there and what motivates them. Attend meetings, which is so much easier to do now because many of the meetings are hybrid. And so you don't even have to leave your home to hear about some of the deliberations that local politicians are having about decisions made or not. Right. And so I would encourage people to be engaged in that sense if they have the time. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, as a systems thinker, we always say that all change starts with self and all change is local.
Yes.
Vote, Beach, pace.
Yes. Yeah, it's true.
Right.
Thank you so much, Darcy, for this opportunity today.
Thank you, Beach. You've got my vote.
Thank you.
What happens when a woman takes power? What happens when she won't back down? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens? What happens? What happens when a woman takes power? What happens?